Okay, guys. Well, good morning. Thank you for coming to my talk. First of all, I just want to congratulate Cleveland for the NBA championship. Good job, guys. I can care less about basketball. I just care about the city. So congratulations. My name is Nir, and I'm actually going to tell you a story today. Anyone like stories? Great. How about detective stories? Great. So today's story is going to be a detective story, a cybersecurity detective story, and it is based on real facts. However, it is only based. So here is my first and only disclaimer for today. All the evidence from this story is coming in from the news media and from cybersecurity reports. The indicators are real. However, there are some things that were behind the scene and nobody knows. On those things, I will use my imagination and fill the gap. Great? Okay. Give me 1 minute. Okay, sorry about that. So a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Israel, and the story today is going to be about Israel. I served 3 years in the Israeli army, like any other male, specifically in the intelligence corps, but I cannot tell you more about it or I have to kill you. I graduated as a computer engineer from a Technion, which is a technical university in Israel. I moved to the US 15 years ago and spent my past 15 years as a security engineer for mostly network security vendors. Lately, I moved into a very interesting and new space, which is threat intelligence, and this is what our story today is going to be about. Okay, so here's what we're going to do today. I'll talk a little bit about indicators of compromise. Then I'll explain a little bit how those can help you to detect and prevent intrusions. Then I'll make the case that each and every of you incident response engineers and security analysts are a little bit of Sherlock Holmes, and at least can or should think like that. And then I'll tell you a regular detective story. It will have a suspect, a body, a weapon, and even a twist at the end. Sounds good? Great. So indicators. Who knows what indicators of compromise are? Okay, so indicators of compromise are artifacts within the network or operating system that most probably indicates an intrusion. Now, indicators are not specific to any cyber attack model. However, I've added here on the bottom, this is the kill chain model, which probably you're familiar with. So in the kill chain model, there are multiple phases. The first phase is a recon, then the hacker weaponized, then the hacker delivered the weapon, whether using email attachments or a web link. Then it exploits the victim, and then usually it beacons back into command and control for further instructions. Now, through this entire process, there are multiple indicators that can be collected by either humans or computers. What you see here on the top is a pyramid, which is called the pyramid of pain. You heard about it before? I'll explain to you why it's called the pyramid of pain. You can see here there's example of indicators. So an indicator could be a hash value. For example, it could be an MD5 hash of a malware file. IP addresses and domains could be related to command and control server. Now, the higher you go in the pyramid, the more sophisticated the indicators are. So you start looking at infrastructure and tools. And at the end, you have TTP, which stands for Tactic, Techniques, and Procedures. And this is an indicator that trying to profile the adversary, trying to identify how they act. So those are indicators. Why indicators are important? Two reasons. First, they help the SOC engineers to identify attacks while they're happening. The other one, it helps to prevent future attacks by implementing those indicators as rules within your firewalls, IDSs, antivirus solutions, etc. This is a list of some of Sherlock Holmes' quotes, usually when he talks to his loyal assistant. Remember his name? Dr. Watson, correct. But think about indicators for a second, okay? Try to look at those quotes. For example, first-hand evidence. This is very relevant for indicators. Indicators found within your environment are much more important than those found or detected by a third party. The world is full of obvious things which nobody by any chance can see. Very relevant for indicators. There are literally millions of indicators shared over the web every single day by multiple vendors, some of them trying to sell you those indicators. The problem is that no security operations center can handle so many indicators. And so, just like a detective, a security analyst to need to cut through the noise and identify those indicators that are relevant to them and move the investigation to their corporate. Now, I decided to show you this slide because to me, it looks like those detective walls of evidence. You know, when they're trying to they're trying to solve a murder case. Have you seen this in movies before? You know, you have the fingerprints. This is our indicators. You have the body. This is the exploit target. You have a suspect, you have a weapon, and you have a crime, right? And like I said, who is the detective in our story, in the cyber world? The security analyst, right? So, in actuality, this is a visualization of a protocol which called STIX, or STIX Taxi. And STIX Taxi is trying to create a standard for exchanging threat intelligence information between communities. So, the point I'm trying to make is you cannot ignore from the similarity to a detective wall, and you cannot ignore the similarity to a detective work when you're talking about threat intelligence analysis. Okay, so let's start the story. Okay. This is a little weak, by the way. So, our story starts at the summer of 2012 at the Israeli police department. Some of the employees within the police department got an email from who seems to be Benny Gantz. Benny Gantz was at the time the Israeli Defense Force Chief General, and he was sending an email that seems to be an article, a news article, stating IDF strikes militants in Gaza Strip following rocket barrage, which was very relevant because of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So some of the employees clicked on the link, downloaded the article, read it, came back to their houses to spend the time with the family, and that's it. Around 3 months later, on August 26, 2012, an emergency call was made to the incident response team of the Israeli Police Department. Apparently, a suspicious activity was detected between the top secret Israel Police Department network and the government network. The incident response coordinator assembled all the team. The team was talking, analyzing log files, and came up with some conclusions. And it was bad. It was very bad. It has never been done in the Israeli department before. But the Israeli Police Department CISO had no choice and couldn't take any other risk. He ordered to disconnect the entire police department to the network and to the internet. Some of the files that moved were started to be investigated. A phone call was made to the Prime Minister of Israel to advise on what could have been one of the largest cybercrime against the Israeli Police Department. A press news came the next day saying few of the servers are being investigated and it's not sure when connection will be restored. Everyone were asking what just happened. To solve the mystery, the Israeli Police Department hired what was the best white hacker at the time, Detective X. Detective X was already at the Hall of Fame page of Google and Twitter for penetration and finding vulnerabilities on those systems. Detective X was working as a security analyst. He had connection in threat intelligence communities around the world. And he was just the right person to solve the mystery. He was using the same techniques those hackers was using. He was trying to look for the soft places and penetrate the Israeli police network, just like a hacker will do. And like a very good security analyst, Detective X followed the threat intelligence process. He was collecting the indicators. Then he processed and enriched the indicators. Then he analyzed the results and came up with conclusion. And finally, he disseminated the relevant indicators into defense mechanisms, such as firewalls, IDSs, and so on. Let's see how he did that. This PowerPoint doesn't like me. Okay. The first piece of evidence Detective X had was the actual file downloaded by some of the Israeli Police Department employees. It was a raw Windows file, SFX file, that had 3 files in it. One was what seems to be the article. However, it was an executable. It was really hard to spot that because of the long name of the file. The other was an icon of a Word document. So the executable, which seems to be like a legitimate Word document. And the last was the lure file, the actual file that had the article those employees were reading. Detective X was running all those MD5 against VirusTotal to see if there's any history of those files can find in the VirusTotal repository. The next piece of evidence Detective X has was the email header coming in to the police department. Using Fish Tank, he uploaded the email coming in. And you can see that Benny Gantz obviously doesn't have a Gmail account. That was not really Benny Gantz. It was another impersonalization. When getting the email into Fish Tank, Detective X found there are multiple Israeli agencies got similar emails. This is an example of a header in Fish Tank that was sent to the Israeli government custom department. So obviously those hackers were after more than just the Israeli police department. Okay, the next piece of evidence Detective X had was the URL in the email pointing into what seems to be a news portal. If you look at the legitimate Israeli news portals, there is an Israeli portal that named ynet.co.il. However, the actual link within the email was ynet.sites.net. So it was another disguised URL. Detective X used solutions like Whois in order to identify who owned that URL, which IP addresses it resolved to. And he came up with US hosting facility. However, he found out, looking at Farsight, that there are DNS database history records showing the same URL going into another place and with another IP address. And it found out that it was Gaza. So the subnet showed it's owned by a Palestinian telecommunication company, and the source was Gaza. Next, Detective X used a sandbox in order to run the malicious file, and he found out that it came up as an extreme rat. Anyone familiar with extreme rat? So extreme rat is a commercial available malware that can be both in the dark web, and it includes a server and a client piece. It's just like a remote desktop, only for hackers. So the server is being installed on the victim side, the client is being used by the hacker. And it's very, very dangerous because it allows remote shells, it allows uploading and downloading files, it allows capturing the screen, and it even allows taking over the web camera if you have one. Getting this information was interesting, but more interesting was that on that specific sample of Extreme Rat was a Microsoft certificate. The communication back into command and control was not authenticated. It ended up to be a fake root certificate. However, this certificate had a serial number, and every Microsoft certificate has a unique serial number. And so Detective X could take those serial numbers, run them against his malicious certificate database, and find out which other tools are being used. And most probably, those tools are going to be used by the same adversary. Next, we're getting forward in the attack. Now, we're looking at the communication back in the command and control. The piece of malware is not, any piece of malware rat is not downloading all the information. It starts with a Trojan, and to avoid antivirus detection, it removed or downloaded later on the payload. So the payload was downloaded from a site named skype.servermp3.com. Again, trying to disguise as a valid Skype connection. Detective X was looking into his database, and he found out that there are multiple malwares communicating with this site. And then again, those malwares are multiply communicating with other command and control. And so Detective X created this diagram of all the connection and tried to figure out when it starts. Well, eventually, he found out it starts from 2011, and the first malware reported back to the command and control was actually Poison Ivy. You familiar with Poison Ivy? Poison Ivy, similarly, is out-of-the-shelf malware, mostly used in the Middle East. And Poison Ivy has the similar characteristics. It allows customization of a server being installed on the client, on the victim side, and then the attacker has the client side. Now, if you put a sniffer on the network while Detective X is running the malware, you can identify the traffic between the malware and the command and control. It starts with 256 challenge requests asking for a specific password. If it matches the password, it continues with 4 bytes of the payload size sequentially going to be downloaded from command and control for further instructions. Those 4 bytes are very unique to the attack investigated by Detective X. He found out that those 4 bytes are consistent around all the malware samples he had. And so what it means is this is a very high ratio signal to noise indicators. It allows you to identify in a high percentage anything that goes on the network with that specific sequence is most probably a poison IV interaction. The other thing about the communication was that all the interactions with poison IV was manually. So just like you guys doing a remote access or remote desktop and you need to interact manually, the same thing goes with a remote access tool malware. The hacker really wanted to get information, and the malware was not automatically running in the Israeli police department. It was controlled manually by a guy behind the other side. So far, Detective X realized most of the attacks coming in from Gaza to Israel. However, one of the malwares kind of threw the investigation into a confusion. And the reason is that some of the emails with the same signature and same attributes were in Arabic. And some of the articles were related to Palestinian issues and not Israeli issues, which means that the target was also Palestinians. Why would Palestinians from Gaza will hack Palestinians? Why they will use them as a target? This part was not clear to Detective X. Okay, so this is what we have so far. Remember the pyramid of pain? Remember the tactics and techniques and procedures for that specific attack, which are really hard for the adversary to change. This is kind of a summary of them. We know that they were reconning on the police department around 2012. We know that the weapon was Extreme Rat, which is out-of-the-shelf, customizable malware. We know they used phishing, and the lure file was an Israeli news article. We know they used a fake MS certificate, and we know all or most of the indicators pointing into Gaza. Detective X thought he knows who the hackers are. So Detective X used the Shabak force and the threat intelligence community to look at what's going on within Gaza. And sure enough, he found something that is not less than amazing. It looks like within Gaza, hackers from one political party hacking the other political party. It looks like Hamas has their own hackers, and Fatah had their own hackers, and those hackers are fighting with each other. The opposition against the coalition. And he also found that at some point the coalition was arresting hackers suspicious of getting the government side down. That could explain those samples with Arabic in it. But Detective X thought that those guys were also the guys attacking the Israeli police department. And why? Because, as some of you know, there's one goal for all the Palestinians, regardless of where they are. They don't like Israel. And so, sure enough, they bragged about it in Twitter. And they even gave an anonymous interview to one of the Arabic news channels. And here is the guys that claim to hack the Israeli police department. They said there were 5 guys. Each one of them has a very specific part within the attack, just a little team. And the first one was responsible for the recon. The second one was responsible to get the Extreme Rat malware. Then the other one was lifting the script within the site to gather more information. They have the Shadow. They have also some, cool nicknames. The Shadow was responsible for the inside SQL injections to gather and infiltrate the data back into command and control. And Prince was their fearless leader. So Prince was coordinating the whole team and trying to get attacks on others. So Prince was interviewing to that Arabic news channel and said that they were trying to hack into the Israel exchange and the Israel Jerusalem banks. And apparently the Israeli police department at the time was the softest target. Why? Because they resist Israel. So it was a geopolitical hacking type. And so the Shabak force, together with Detective X, went into Gaza, got a hold of the hackers, put them in jail, and they all lived happily ever after. Thank you. So this part is a fiction, unfortunately. Yeah, so unfortunately that didn't happen. Unfortunately, it doesn't really happen. That happens only on stories. So let's talk a little bit about what really happened and where Extreme Rat is today. So the bitter truth is that 2 years after the attack in 2014, the Israeli government got bite again by Extreme Rat. And it's not like the Israeli government and the police department didn't put any measures to block this. It's just like I said earlier, it's really high customizable malware. You can change the ports it communicates on, you can change the footprint of the malware. So it's really hard to entirely block it. And the malware is still active today, 2016. However, less on the Middle East, so Middle East attacks becoming more and more sophisticated, but script kiddies are using Extreme Rat, and interestingly enough, they're using it to spy after people. So, you know, even boys spying after girls, because as you remember, there's the feature where you can take over the web camera. So at this point, Extreme Rat is used a lot for spying. This is just another article I found with regards to pro-Palestinians. It looks like some of them managed to hack into a news portal called Haaretz. Haaretz is a big news portal, and they were bragged about it in Twitter again. But the next day, they realized that Haaretz is a left-wing news portal, and that it's actually pro-Palestinian, and it's for a Palestinian state. So the funny part is the next day they had another tweet where they said, "We're sorry about it, and be sure no one will attack you again." So I guess the idea here is it's really complicated in the Middle East, right? It's not Palestinians against Israel or Israel against Palestinians only. Palestinians against Palestinians. They distinguish between Israelis, etc. It's really complicated. So just a couple of last words on indicators. We can talk about it later. I think it's very important to understand that indicators not only helping within the process of identifying real-time attacks, but also with creating signatures. So as you may know, today there are multiple threat intelligence services that sell intel and sell feeds or threat intelligence reports. Why? Because those things can help you prevent the next attack. And so, for example, creating snort rules, creating Yara rules, all those things is a challenge for the security operations centers today. Why? Because, like I said, there are millions of indicators, and you cannot, physically, you cannot implement that many indicators within your defense mechanism. You have to pick up the relevant for you. The blacklist cannot be that big. So we're getting close to the end of the talk. Like I said in the beginning, the Detective X obviously is imaginary, but the process of running indicators through analyzing and enrichment was real. They all came up from Kaspersky, FireEye, and Norman reports. And most importantly, those are relevant not only for cyber war crime like they had between Palestine and Israel. Those processes are relevant for corporate espionage, for credit card theft, for health record theft. Anything has in it, and anything includes the human human part of it as well. It's not only about machines finding indicators, about the combination of machines and people. So, and using the time is very important, very key, using the right resource and time. So that was my talk, and thank you. And if you have any questions, would be happy to answer. Any questions? Yeah. Okay, so great question. So the question was whether the today is 2016, the attacks are being changed, and the answer is yes. So hackers are being much more sophisticated. We see in the Israelis defense mechanisms that hackers are using more and more customized homegrown malwares rather than off-the-shelf. And we also see other vectors. So it's less about Gaza in Israel today. As you probably heard, there's Iran, Israel, Syria, Israel. Almost every front that is into a physical war with Israel also has a cyber war with Israel. Okay, thank you everyone. Have a great day.